The door of the old solid wood wardrobe yielded with a long, lingering creak, revealing the dark interior where the scent of accumulated dust and time seemed to rest in silence. Elias kept his hand on the cold metal doorknob for a few moments, letting the room's air mingle with the confined air of that forgotten space. Outside, the night had brought a steady rain. Drops beat against the window pane in an irregular rhythm, tracing twisting paths that distorted the faint streetlights. The sound of water falling on the leaves outside and the soft hiss of the tires of the few cars passing on the wet asphalt formed a sonic curtain that isolated the room from the rest of the world. Maybe this is just another one of those quiet stories made to help you relax, and sometimes that's all we really need. Perhaps this is just another one of those tranquil stories made for relaxation, and sometimes that's all we need. At the back of the highest shelf, almost hidden by cardboard boxes and folded blankets, a black case rested. Its peculiar shape, narrow at one end and rounded at the other, hinted at what lay within. Many years had passed since that case had seen the light of day. The synthetic leather covering it was dull, coated in a thin, persistent layer of gray dust that erased any shine it might have once had. Elias looked at the object with attentive quietness. It was a silent imbalance, a hushed voice that had been stored away and left behind. An instrument made to vibrate and fill the air shouldn't spend decades locked in the dark. The decision formed simply and definitively in his mind. He wouldn't let the small violin spend another forgotten night. With slow movements, Elias stretched his arms and grasped the case handle. The weight was less than he remembered, but the sensation of holding something fragile and precious remained the same. He pulled the case carefully, preventing it from scraping against the wood of the shelf, and brought it close to his body. A faint scent of mold and old cloth detached from the object as he moved it. The rain outside seemed to thicken slightly, the sound of water hitting the roof creating a continuous, comforting base for the work that was about to begin. He walked to the center of the room, where a light-colored, sturdy wooden table was positioned under the yellowish light of a pendant lamp. The light created a circle of warm clarity on the empty tabletop. Elias placed the black case in the center of this circle of light. The thud of the case bottom hitting the table's wood was dull and dry. He ran his flat palm over the lid, feeling the rough texture of accumulated dust beneath his fingertips. The dust clung lightly to his hand, and he wiped it on a soft cloth folded in the corner of the table. The case had two silver metal clasps, now darkened by the oxidation of time. Elias leaned in a little closer, observing the small details of the aged metal. The promise of that night was simple: to restore dignity to that wood, to clean the marks of abandonment, and to prepare the instrument so that it might, perhaps, breathe again. He had no hurry. The rainy night stretched long and uninterrupted before him. The smell of wet earth began to seep in through a small window crack, mingling with the dry scent of the closed case. Elias pulled a curved-back chair and sat before the table. The chair's wood creaked softly under his weight, settling. He rested his forearms on the table's edge, looking at the metal clasps. The room was immersed in an atmosphere of anticipation. The sound of the rain outside seemed to wash not only the streets and roofs, but also the very time that had accumulated on that object. With a tranquil sigh, he brought his thumbs to the clasps. The metal was cold. He pressed the first clasp to the side. A dry metallic click broke the constant sound of the rain, echoing clearly through the room. The first step was taken. The small violin's isolation had ended. Elias moved his hand to the second case clasp. The metal offered slight resistance, stiffened by years of immobility, but yielded with a firm snap under the constant pressure of his thumb. With both clasps released, he gripped the edge of the lid and slowly lifted it. The zipper that outlined the case had been left open long ago, so the lid rose without difficulty. The hinges at the back creaked a low, drawn-out sound, as if waking from a deep sleep. When the case opened completely, a dense, complex odor filled the air around the table. It was a scent that blended the dryness of aged wood, the sweet touch of hardened resin, and the characteristic odor of old velvet that had spent too long without ventilation. The interior was lined with a soft, dark moss-green fabric, which seemed to absorb the lamp's light. Nestled in the center of this velvet cradle rested the small violin. The violin looked exhausted. The varnish, which should once have reflected light with warm hues of honey and amber, was now covered by an opaque blanket of fine grayish dust. The elegant curves of the wood lost their definition beneath that layer of oblivion. 2 of the 4 strings were broken. One was coiled upon itself like a twisted metal thread without purpose, while the other hung loose, touching the wood with a desolate appearance. The bridge, that small piece of light-colored wood that should hold the strings aloft, was slightly tilted forward out of its ideal position. Elias observed the instrument's state for a long moment. The sound of rain against the glass seemed to accompany his gaze, the drops running in continuous streams as he absorbed every detail of the wear. He brought his hands to the violin, holding its long, dark neck with his left hand and supporting the rounded base with his right. As he lifted it from the case, he felt the surprising lightness of the wood. It was a hollow, delicate shell, seeming almost too fragile to bear the tension that music demanded. He carefully laid it on a clean white cotton cloth he had spread over the table. The first step was to remove the layer of dust that suffocated the varnish. Elias picked up a very soft microfiber cloth, folding it into a small square that fit perfectly in his palm. He started with the top plate, the front of the violin. The touch of the fabric on the wood was silent. With circular, continuous movements, without applying force, he began to glide the cloth over the surface. The dust yielded easily, adhering to the fibers of the cloth. As Elias's hand moved over the upper curves of the violin, the true tone of the wood began to reveal itself beneath the grime. It was a golden brown, rich and deep, although the wood appeared parched from lack of care. He passed the cloth around the 2 openings in the center of the instrument, the curved cutouts that looked like letters drawn in the wood. Along these edges, the dust had accumulated more thickly. He used his fingertip, covered by the cloth, to trace the delicate design of each crack, collecting the trapped dirt. The room was filled only by the soft rustle of the cloth against the wood and the constant sound of the rain outside. A gust of wind made the drops beat harder against the window, and the yellowish light flickered for a fraction of a second, but soon stabilized. He turned the cloth to use a clean part. He moved down to the violin's lower curves, cleaning the area where the musician's chin usually rests. The dust was slightly stuck, perhaps mixed with some old moisture, but yielded after a few calm, repeated passes.
When the top plate was free of gray dust, he held the violin by its neck and turned it over. The back of the violin was made of a different wood, marked with small alternating dark and light waves. Elias passed the cloth over the entire length of the violin's back in long top-to-bottom movements. With each pass, the natural design of the wood leapt out, gaining contrast. The dust fell onto the white tablecloth like dirty, fine snow. He cleaned the sides, following the winding contour that formed the instrument's waist. The sensation of tracing those shapes with his hand was like reading an old embossed map. Finally, he cleaned the upper part, where the tuning pegs and the scroll were located, that carved wooden spiral at the end of the neck. Dust hid in the turns of the spiral, and he used a small, soft, bristled brush to sweep the most difficult corners. The powder rose into the air, dancing under the lamp's light before disappearing. The violin was now clean, free of its gray shroud. The wood breathed again, though its surface still appeared dry and thirsty, yearning for something to restore its lost vitality. With the dust removed, the dryness of the varnish became even more evident. The violin's surface, though now showing its true color, did not reflect the lamp's light continuously. There were small opaque spots and a slightly rough texture to the touch, clear signs that the wood had lost its natural moisture over the years locked in the dark wardrobe. He knew that before attempting to put any tension on that hollow body, he needed to return some life to it. He opened a small drawer on the side of the workbench. The sound of the wood sliding on the old runners was a low, short rumble. From there, he took a small, dark glass bottle, sealed with a treaded metal cap, and a piece of yellow cotton flannel, never before used. The bottle contained a natural oil, prepared specifically to clean and hydrate old woods without damaging the original varnish. Elias unscrewed the metal cap. The metallic sound of the thread turning preceded the release of a fresh, citrusy aroma, blended with a very subtle woody undertone. The scent of the oil slowly spread through the illuminated space of the table, layering over the odor of dust and velvet that still lingered in the air. The rain outside maintained its regular rhythm, a liquid murmur that seemed to muffle the city sounds and isolate the room in a bubble of tranquility. He folded the yellow flannel into several parts until it formed a thick, soft pad. He tilted the small glass bottle and pressed its mouth against the fabric, letting only a few drops of the thick, golden liquid stain the cotton. The dark spot on the yellow fabric exhaled the citrus scent more intensely. Elias replaced the cap on the bottle and moved it to the corner of the table, returning his attention to the violin's body resting on the white cloth. With his fingertips resting lightly on the instrument's neck to keep it steady, Elias pressed the dampened flannel against the lower part of the front plate. The contact of the oil with the dry wood produced an almost immediate transformation. The exact moment the fabric touched the surface and began to move in slow circles, the opacity vanished. A deep, warm, translucent sheen emerged in the wake of his hand's movement. The golden brown color seemed to ignite from within, gaining a richness of tones that had previously been hidden. He advanced slowly. His right hand drew small concentric circles, spreading the thin layer of oil evenly. The rough texture beneath the flannel transformed into a smooth, slippery surface. The sound of the flannel rubbing the varnish was a continuous soft whisper, harmonizing with the sound of raindrops hitting the window. He traced the edges of the instrument, feeling the subtle relief where the top plate met the sides. He passed the cloth around the central openings, taking care that the liquid did not run into the hollow body. The wood eagerly absorbed the hydration, drinking the natural oil and returning a vivid reflection of the lamp's yellowish light. After covering the entire front, he turned the violin over. The back, with its natural waves drawn in light and dark wood, awaited. Elias applied 2 more drops of oil to the flannel and restarted the process. Here, the optical effect was even more impressive. As the dampened cloth glided over the instrument's back, the horizontal lines seemed to gain movement, creating an effect of optical depth. The wood appeared 3-dimensional, the darker bands receding and the lighter ones leaping into view. He rubbed the flannel in long movements, following the direction of the wood grain, from the neck to the base. The tactile sensation in his hands changed every minute. What was once dry and lifeless now felt soft, almost warm under the friction of the cloth. The scent of lemon and dampened wood filled the room, creating an atmosphere of renewal. He passed the flannel over the curved sides, paying attention to the pointed corners that formed the instrument's classic design. Every inch was touched. Every curve received its share of hydration. Finally, he used a dry part of the same flannel to remove any excess oil that the wood had not absorbed. The movement now was faster, polishing the surface lightly. The violin lying on the table no longer looked like an object rescued from dusty oblivion. It shone with a silent dignity, reflecting the lamp's circle of light on its now smooth and restored surface. The wood was satiated, its colors revived, ready to bear the work that would follow. Elias paused for a moment, rested his hands on the table's edge, and simply observed the deep sheen of the instrument, while the wind outside made the rain drum a little faster against the dark glass. The violin's body now shone with renewed health, but the upper part of the instrument, where the long dark neck and tuning mechanisms were, still bore the marks of time and abandonment. Elias focused his gaze on the long strip of black wood that ran down the violin's neck, the place where the musician's fingers should press the strings. This piece, made of incredibly dense, dark wood, was stained with old marks of sweat and ingrained dust. Above it, in the tuning box, 4 black wooden pegs held the twisted remnants of the old strings. Elias began the work of cleaning this area by removing what remained of the old strings. With his left hand, he firmly held the violin's neck. With his right, he gripped the first side peg. The peg's wood was stiff. He applied slight pressure, turning the peg towards his body. There was a dry, sharp snap as years of friction were broken, and the peg finally yielded, turning with a rough creak. The tension of the broken string completely disappeared. He unwound the oxidized metal wire that was caught in the peg's small hole. The old metal was stiff and rough to the touch, smelling of rusted iron. Elias pulled the string to the end of the instrument, releasing it from the dark piece that held it at the base, and placed it aside on the table. The metallic thread fell with a faint, non-resonant sound. He repeated the process with the other 3 strings. Each peg required a little force to loosen. Each old string was unwound and removed carefully so as not to scratch the newly polished wood. The small, light-colored wooden piece that served as the bridge, now without the pressure of the strings to hold it in place, fell flat on the top plate. Elias picked it up and put it in the corner of the table. The violin was now completely stripped, silent and vulnerable. Without the strings crossing its body,
The long black wooden strip of the neck was fully exposed. Elias picked up a small piece of extremely fine steel wool, the kind used for delicate polishing. He wouldn't use oil here, as this wood needed to remain firm and clean for contact with the fingers. With short, precise movements, he began to rub the steel wool along the dark wood. The sound was a constant hiss, a soft friction that scraped away accumulated dirt without harming the surface. A very fine, dark dust began to loosen, falling on the white tablecloth. The continuous rain on the window seemed to synchronize with the rhythm of his hand. The hiss of the steel wool mingled with the whisper of drops on the glass. Elias traversed the entire length of the neck, from top to bottom, feeling the wood's texture change under the pressure of his fingers. What was once sticky and uneven became incredibly smooth. He wiped away the loose dust with a dry cloth. The dark wood now revealed its natural state, dense, opaque, but with a smoothness reminiscent of a river-polished stone surface. It was a cold, firm texture to the touch. Next, Elias turned his attention to the 4 tuning pegs. They needed to turn smoothly, but at the same time lock firmly to hold the tension of the new strings. He removed the first peg from its hole. The small, dark wooden cone had 2 shiny circular marks where the friction with the tuning box was greatest. Elias picked up a small stick that looked like dark chalk, made from a mixture of clay and graphite, specific for lubricating and providing grip to these pieces. He passed the stick around the shiny marks on the peg. The material crumbled slightly, covering the wood with a thin gray layer. He returned the peg to its hole and turned it several times. The rough, creaking sound before had vanished. Now the peg turned with a soft, silent resistance, locking firmly when Elias pushed it in a little further. He tested the movement with his thumb and forefinger, feeling the mechanical precision of wood against wood. Satisfied, he repeated the process with the other 3 pegs. Remove, apply graphite, replace, turn. The repetition of the gesture brought a methodical calm to the environment. The violin was now completely clean. Its body shone with oil, its neck was smooth and prepared, and its tuning mechanisms worked with the precision of a newly lubricated antique clock. The foundation was ready. The instrument was cleansed of its past and prepared to receive the elements that would give it voice again. Elias leaned back in the chair, feeling the slight tension in his shoulders relax. He looked at the dark window, where the rainwater formed changing patterns on the glass, and took a deep breath, smelling the wood, citrus oil, and graphite that now dominated the room.
On the table, beside the cleaning tools, lay a sealed, intact brown paper envelope. Elias reached out and pulled it to the center of the circle of light. The sound of the stiff paper sliding over the table's wood was crisp and dry. He turned the envelope over and lifted the back flap, breaking the seal with his thumb. Inside, there were 4 small square packets of translucent paper, each containing a new string coiled in a perfect circle. He picked up the packet marked with the letter indicating the thickest, lowest string. As he opened the thin paper, the metal string sprang lightly into his hand, uncoiling like a small silver spring. The new metal shone brightly under the lamp's light. At one end, there was a small golden metal loop. At the other, the wire was covered by a tightly wound red silk thread. The string was cold and rough due to its spiraled coating. Elias held the violin by its neck, keeping it steady on the table. He took the end with the golden loop and fitted it into the slot of the dark piece at the base of the instrument, pulling it to lock it in place. Then he stretched the string along the body of the violin, passing it over the smooth black neck until it reached the tuning box. He took the red silk-wrapped end and inserted it into the small hole of the corresponding peg. The metal tip passed through the wood with ease. With the fingers of his right hand, he began to turn the tuning peg away from himself. The movement was slow. With each turn, the string coiled neatly around the peg's wood, the red silk creating a strong contrast with the dark wood. The slack in the string gradually decreased. Elias used his left forefinger to keep the string aligned as it began to stretch. Tension started to build. The metal, previously loose, became a straight, rigid line. He didn't tighten it completely, leaving it just firm enough not to slip. The small violin let out a slight, almost inaudible snap, a sound of wood adjusting to the first pressure after so many years. He repeated the process with the second string, a little thinner than the first. The loop at the base, the blue silk end in the peg's hole, turn, coil, stretch. The metallic sound of the string scraping against the wood as it settled mingled with the drumming of the rain, which now fell at a constant, hypnotic rhythm, without wind gusts, just a continuous curtain of water outside. The third string was even thinner, smooth under his fingers, without the spiraled texture of the lower strings. The green silk end found its way through the peg's hole. Elias turned the wood, feeling the soft mechanical resistance he had prepared earlier. The string rose, stretching parallel to the other two. Finally, the last string. It was the thinnest of all, a bare steel wire that felt almost sharp to the touch. The yellow silk end was inserted into the last peg. Elias turned with extra care, knowing this was the most fragile string and prone to breaking if the tension was too abrupt. The steel wire stretched with a sharp, muffled hum when he ran his finger over it to test the tension. Now the 4 strings were stretched over the instrument, but resting on the neck wood. The bridge was missing, the structural heart that would elevate the strings and transmit vibration to the body of the violin. Elias picked up the small, light-colored wooden piece he had stored in the corner of the table. It had the shape of an arch, with small, elaborate cutouts and 4 tiny notches on the curved top. He slightly loosened the strings, just enough to create a space between them and the instrument's body. Carefully, he slid the wooden bridge under the metal strings, positioning it exactly between the 2 curved openings in the center of the top plate. The bridge's base, with its 2 small carved feet, settled perfectly on the varnish's curve. Elias held the bridge vertically with the thumb and forefinger of his left hand, and with his right hand he began to turn the tuning pegs again, gradually increasing the tension of the strings, alternating between them so that the pressure on the bridge was evenly distributed. As the tension increased, the strings pressed the bridge against the violin's body. The instrument seemed to gain physical life under his hands. The hollow wood creaked very slightly, accepting the weight, distributing the force along its curves. The 4 strings now rested in their tiny notches on top of the bridge, raised above the dark neck, parallel and ready. Elias ran his thumb across the 4 strings. The sound was not musical. It was just a dry metallic chord loose in the air, but the resonance was already there. The vibration traveled through the violin's body and could be felt in the table's wood. The instrument was whole again. The structure had been rebuilt. With the violin assembled and resting on the table, Elias's attention turned to the open case lid. Fastened to the upper inner part, held by a small swiveling clip, was the bow. It was a long, slender, dark wood stick, a slightly curved inward, ending in a small square piece at the base, adorned with a mother-of-pearl circle that reflected the light. He turned the clip and released the bow. As he held it, he noticed that the horsehair ribbon that should be stretched from end to end hung loose and disordered. Some strands were loose, broken by dryness, hanging like white spider webs against the dark wood. The bow was the tool that would draw sound from the strings. Without it, the violin would remain mute.
Elias picked up a small tipped scissors from his toolbox. With precision and calm, he separated the broken strands from the rest of the loose ribbon. He didn't pull them, as that could loosen the internal binding. Instead, he cut each broken strand flush with the bow's ends. The sound of the metal blades cutting the dry horsehair was a tiny, sharp click. He removed about 5 or 6 damaged strands, leaving only those that were still whole and firmly attached from end to end. After removing the loose strands, he held the bow's frog with his left hand and used his right hand to turn the small silver metal screw at the end. The metal was a little stiff at first. Elias applied firm, slow pressure. The screw turned with a slight creak, and the small wooden piece holding the horsehair base began to move backward, pulling the strings. The horsehair ribbon, previously loose and disordered, began to align. As he continued to turn the screw, the ribbon stretched, transformed into a flat, white, tense surface, separated from the dark wooden stick by a space of little more than a finger's width. The dark wooden stick resisted the tension, slightly accentuating its natural curvature. Elias stopped turning when he felt the horsehair was firm, but yielded slightly under the pressure of his thumb. The tension was just right, balanced, ready for friction. However, new or newly cleaned horsehair is too smooth to produce sound. It would slide over the string's metal without gripping them. Friction needed to be added. Elias reached for a small rectangular block wrapped in a soft cloth inside a case compartment. Unwrapping the cloth revealed a block of solid, translucent, dark amber resin. It was rosin. The surface of the block was smooth and glassy, untouched for a long time. For the resin to adhere to the horsehair, the smooth surface needed to be broken. Elias took a small piece of sandpaper and lightly passed it over the top of the amber block. The friction scratched the surface, creating a layer of fine white powder over the yellowish resin. The scent of pine sap, sweet and pungent, immediately rose into the air, mingling with the smell of the rain that continued to fall outside. The aroma was strong, evoking memories of damp forests and cut wood.
He held the rosin block with his left hand and the bow with his right. He placed the stretched horsehair ribbon over the scratched surface of the rosin. With a long, continuous motion, Elias slid the bow from the frog to the tip over the block. The sound was immediate and harsh, a dry, vibrant hiss of pure friction. The white rosin powder transferred to the horsehair strands. He repeated the motion, from bottom to top, from top to bottom. The sound of the bow scraping over the rosin created its own rhythm in the silent room, a cadenced back and forth that accompanied the sound of drops on the window. With each pass, the horsehair gradually lost its smooth, shiny appearance, gaining an opaque whitish texture. A very fine powder fell into the air under the lamp's light, like stardust before settling on the table. Elias passed the bow over the rosin a few more times, focusing on the ends where pressure is usually greater. He tested the grip by lightly running the tip of his thumb over the stretched strands. His finger met resistance, clinging to the rough, dusty texture that now covered the horsehair. The bow was prepared. He gently placed it on the table next to the violin. The instrument of voice and the resonance box were finally ready to meet. The night outside seemed to have quieted a little, the rain diminishing its intensity to a constant murmur, as if the entire environment awaited what would come next. The violin and bow rested side by side under the warm lamplight. Elias looked at his hands, noticing the white rosin dust on his fingers and the subtle sheen of oil on his palms. He wiped his hands on the cotton towel before stretching his arms to pick up the instrument. He held the violin by its dark neck with his left hand and lifted it. The instrument's weight now felt different, more solid, laden with the tension of the steel strings and the bridge's pressure on the wood. He didn't need an electronic tuner. In a nearby drawer, he found a small U-shaped metal tuning fork. He tapped the tuning fork's prongs on the edge of the table and brought the vibrating stem close to his ear. A pure, clean, continuous tone filled his hearing, vibrating in the air with an exact frequency. It was the reference note. Resting the violin's bass on his leg, he used his right thumb to pluck the second finished string. The sound that emerged was loose and low, out of perfect pitch. With his left hand, he held the corresponding tuning peg. He plucked the string again, and while the sound was still resonating, turned the peg infinitesimally forward. The note rose, gliding through the air like a rising sigh, until it aligned exactly with the memory of the tuning fork's tone. Harmony was achieved. The string vibrated with clarity. He repeated the process with the other 3 strings, using the first as reference. Pluck the string, listen to the oscillation, turn the wooden peg, feel the tension increase under his fingers, and hear the note stabilize. The dry, short clicks of the wood adjusting to the pressure punctuated the process. The sound of the rain outside seemed to recede, becoming just a soft background texture before the metallic, vibrant notes that began to emerge in the room. When 4 strings were aligned, responding to each other with perfect resonance, Elias stopped. He rose from the chair. The space around the table seemed to have shrunk before the presence of the in-tuned instrument. Elias picked up the bow with his right hand, holding the frog with the necessary lightness, his fingers curved and relaxed over the wood and mother-of-pearl. With his left hand, he lifted the violin and nestled it between his shoulder and the left side of his chin. The smooth, polished wood touched his skin, cold at first contact, but soon absorbing his body's warmth. He smelled the citrus oil and old wood rising directly to his nostrils.
He positioned the bow over the strings, exactly in the space between the bridge and the end of the black neck. The horsehair, covered in rough rosin dust, touched the lowest metal string. Elias had no intention of playing a complex melody or a fast piece. He just wanted to hear the voice of that object that had been silent for so long. With a long, slow, continuous movement of his entire right arm, he drew the bow downwards. The horsehair gripped the string's metal. The friction generated an instant vibration that traveled down the bridge, spread through the top plate, bounced off the wavy wooden back, and exploded outwards through the curved openings. A deep, dark, and incredibly rich sound filled the room. It was a long, sustained note. The physical vibration of the sound traveled from the violin's wood directly to Elias's jawbone, descending through his collarbone and spreading across his chest. It was a tactile and auditory sensation at the same time. The sound was not shrill, it was mature, velvety, carrying the weight of the years the wood had dried and aged in the dark. Elias reached the tip of the bow and, without interrupting the flow, reversed the movement, pushing the bow upwards. The sound continued, unbroken, a long, resonant breath. He slightly tilted the bow and touched the neighboring thinner string. The sound rose in pitch, becoming clearer and brighter, a note that cut through the air with sweetness. He let the note ring freely, feeling the resonance fill every corner of the room, mingling with the sound of rain hitting the window. The water outside and the vibrating wood inside created a natural, melancholy, and peaceful duet. He did not use the fingers of his left hand to change notes. He simply played the open strings one by one, the lowest, deep as a lament. the two middle ones warm and present, the highest thin and crystalline like a thread of light. He drew the bow calmly, prolonging each sound to the limit of the horsehair, letting the violin's wood do the work of amplifying that energy. The white rosin dust released in small invisible clouds with each pass of the bow, falling on the shiny varnish. The small violin, after decades of absolute silence, was singing again, a whole voice, clean and restored, occupying the space that was rightfully its own. The last movement of the bow over the highest string grew lighter and lighter until the horsehair lost contact with the metal. The crystalline note did not stop immediately. It continued to vibrate in the air, sustained by the resonance within the hollow body of the violin, gradually diminishing in volume, like a wave slowly dissipating on the sand. Elias remained motionless, the violin still tucked under his chin, the bow suspended in the air, listening to the sound fade until it was completely swallowed by the constant murmur of rain on the window. When silence returned to the room, it seemed to have a different quality. It was no longer the heavy, stagnant silence of a forgotten object, but the quietness of something that has just spoken and now rests. Elias slowly lowered his arms. He removed the violin from his shoulder and held it before him. The wood was slightly warm where it had touched his skin. On the shiny, dark surface, just below the strings, a thin layer of white rosin dust had accumulated, physical proof of the sound that had been created. He picked up the soft flannel and carefully wiped the white dust from the strings and the wood, erasing the rosin's trace with a gentle movement. Then he slightly loosened the bow's screw, releasing the horsehair's tension so that the wooden stick could relax and not lose its natural curvature over time. The metallic click of the screw turning back was the last mechanical sound of that night's work. Elias walked to the table and placed the bow on the case lid. Then he laid the small violin in its moss-green velvet cradle. The instrument fit perfectly. The contrast between the newly polished golden brown wood and the dark fabric created an image of repose and dignity. He did not close the lid. The case remained open on the table, under the lamp's circle of light, allowing the instrument to breathe the room's air, free from confinement. With the work finished, Elias stepped away from the table. He walked slowly to the window. The glass was cold to the touch when he rested the side of his hand there. Outside, the street was empty, reflecting the orange light of the street lamps in the puddles that formed on the asphalt. The sound of water falling on the leaves outside and the soft hiss of the tires of the few cars passing on the wet asphalt formed a sonic curtain that isolated the room from the rest of the world. Then the silence now was just peace.